Got that old muddy water north, salty water south, Chesapeake Bay blues is what this song's about.
What's going on, everybody? Crazyhorse here. Really excited to have Alan Battista tonight on the show. But before we get started, I'm super proud to announce that we have a sponsor for this show. It's Crazyhorse Custom Fishing Rods. They do custom rods, rod repair, and restoration with a modern twist. I don't know how to get that logo up onto any corners of these screens. So for right now, bear with me, and it's a better looking logo than my face anyway. So give them a call. They do fantastic work, and I've got more content coming up. We're doing a Crazyhorse squared rod because it was my nickname in high school, and it was his. But Crazyhorse Fishing Rods has no relation to me other than the fact that they sponsor my show. Additionally, in the mothership news, Crazyhorse Fishing Rods will be sponsoring that as well. So if you're a customer or a client on Mothership and you're on a fishing trip, you will be fishing with a Crazyhorse custom fishing rod. So that's kind of a cool deal because we're not handing you like an ugly stick. You'll be on a nice crescent kayak with a Crazyhorse custom rod in your hand. But let's bring in Alan to the stream. What's going on, Alan? How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Grant. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing great. Alan Battista is a local author of the popular books Light Tackle Kayak Trolling the Chesapeake Bay and Light Tackle Kayak Jigging the Chesapeake. If you guys have, unless you've been hiding under a rock, you've probably seen some of the really large striped bass that Alan Battista hooks on a pretty consistent basis.
Hold them out further. That's really the secret, Grant.
Somebody was asking about the pick today, and I was like, actually, it's a 16-inch rockfish. Alan's just the smallest human in the world.
Oh, trust me, I saw that comment, Grant. That wasn't lost on me.
He's a lifelong angler, did not come from a fishing family. He's similar to me. My dad was a fishing family, but it skipped a generation with him. He's got a background in engineering, graduated from Penn State and Johns Hopkins, contributed to publications such as Men's Journal, Kayak Angler, and Fish Talk magazine. And lastly, Alan is sponsored by Humminbird, Torqeedo, Smith Optics, Kokatat, in addition to collaborating with many more. It's easy to find Alan following his fishing page on Facebook, Light Tackle Kayak Trolling the Chesapeake. And I'll tell you what, guys, I'm a big proponent of Alan and his books. I tell him all the time. I caught one striped bass before I read his books. And the very next year, that number jumped up to like 250. And it's gone up ever since. And, I'll sing this man's praises. And I was talking to somebody today and saying he made me a much better angler. It's not just the books. And, I don't know how busy he's getting nowadays. He's got 2 kids. It's probably running you dry, right?
Alan? I'm sorry?
The two little girls are probably running you dry.
Oh my gosh. So I'm so lucky that the wife is upstairs watching them right now. It is mayhem when I left. I hope she comes out okay with this. But yes, having the girls is much different than a single parent life or whatever.
But for years, I'd read the books, and for probably 2 or 3 years on what would you say, 2 to 3 nights a week, I'd send you a question outside of what was in the books. And you were always really awesome about answering. So for that, I'll eternally be grateful. But let's just start. And I will say before we start that questions coming from the audience, Alan has a gift or a prize tonight. I'll go ahead and throw that up. Both books, right? Isn't that what they're getting?
Both of them, absolutely.
To the best question of the night, that's going to be the prize for the night. So I couldn't endorse those books more. Even if you're a seasoned angler, it'll make you a better angler. But Alan, how did you get into kayak fishing?
Oh, well, thanks for the introduction, Grant. I appreciate that and the kind words. And there are other questions I enjoy. I mean, one of the reasons you do this is to chat with folks like yourself and everybody else. It's really nice. I actually learned a lot more than I probably put out there, to be honest with you. So how did I get into kayak fishing? It was one of these things where I grew up fishing. Like I said, my parents didn't fish. I didn't really know anyone that fished, but it was something I just kind of drawn to. So Pennsylvania streams, just fishing for trout, that kind of stuff. Nothing really big. When I moved down here after school, basically saw this great playground, the Chesapeake Bay, and I figured I got to give this a shot. Now, I didn't know anything about striped bass. I didn't know anything about the perch or anything else that's here. But a couple of buddies and we bought a boat, and I don't know if anybody's ever bought a boat with a couple of friends. Probably, there's better ways to go about it. The guys are great, but here's the deal: like, they're using it. It's hard to collaborate. There's something always is broken. It's kind of a pain. I mean, that was really the main problem with that whole thing. So we did that for a little while, up until my wife and I went on a trip to St. Lucia. At the resort we stayed at, there were kayaks you could just go out and rent. And I'll tell you, so that was some period of time ago, and kayaks were not, just to set the stage, were not like they are today. I mean, people don't know really what kayaks are all about at the time. So I guess I had preconceived notions that it was kind of like a canoe, hard to paddle. It took a lot of energy and exertion to do it. So little did I know, I mean, we jumped in these kayaks, and the first thing I thought was, wow, these things are really pretty awesome. They move through the water. It's quiet. It's peaceful. And guess what? It's a hunk of plastic, and I'm not going to have to, repair this anytime soon like I did the boat. So as soon as I came back, I went to Dick's and I bought in fact, it's actually hanging right in the wall over there. My very first kayak. It was like a 10-foot long, sit inside green kayak. I think it cost like $300 or something like that back at the time. And so I took that out. I don't even think I knew what I was fishing for. I think I probably caught some carp and whatever else would bite. I mean, literally, there wasn't a lot about kayak fishing at all. So got that.
What year do you think that is? What year are we talking?
That was like early 2000s. I moved down here in 2004. Pretty much been fishing ever since in one fashion or the other. But you kind of crawl before you can walk. So you're kind of learning things. You're stomping through creeks. I spent a lot of time at the Gunpowder River, and just like one thing leads to the next, and suddenly figure out that, hey, wait a second, I can catch rockfish in this thing. And it's kind of born from there. Well, the 10-foot kayak is hard to paddle and all of that. So after 1 year, I said, there's got to be something different. Like, I want to pedal with my legs. I did a Google search, and son of a gun, like these Hobie kayaks came up. And I mean, Hobie, everybody recognizes today, but like I said, at the time, if you had one, you were an anomaly. So I bought one of these things, and every single time I went out, someone said, what is that? What are you doing? I mean, is that like a paddle boat? I mean, the questions you get were kind of crazy in today's optics, but that's how it was. And so little by little, I just kind of adopted kayak fishing because it was a lot easier, and we got rid of the boat, and the rest is kind of history. But that's how I got into it.
You seem to always have the vessel that people are asking questions about. We'll get into the solo skip later.
It's true.
But I'm not gonna. We don't have any per se questions yet, but I do have a comment that I want to highlight that I thought was funny. De Pesca a Pesca says, that does not look like the guy in the books.
All right, you know what? I almost started this conversation saying, hey, I'm not going to
hang on. Mixed Fishing says, holy haircut.
I should have been prepared for these comments. Look, so we got the thing with the quarantine and all that. I have not had a haircut in exactly like 1 year. So this is what it takes. But look, when you got a hair like this, I mean, why would you cut this off? I mean, this is
Man,
something, man.
I gotta give it to you. Like you did your timeline, right? And I'm like, wait, early 2000s? There's no gray in that hair. You got something going on. Oh, okay, so we got our first question of the night.
All right.
And it is, this is fantastic.
Oh, boy, I can't wait.
How long does it take to dry your hair, Alan? Question of the night.
Yeah, that might be the question tonight. I mean, we might just end the questions now.
Oh, they're killing you, bro. Darwin Hayward
Darwin.
says, and we purchased locks of his hair.
Hey, you know
Michael
what?
Michael Dunlap. We got to let him go here in a second. Is that Soul Glow? No, we got a serious question here.
I don't want a serious question. This is getting good.
This is getting good. You know some of these people, so you have the right to fire back.
I know all of these people.
Yeah. So Mike Shally asks, what are his different jigging techniques in different depths of water, from shallow to deeper?
Oh, that's a really good question. All right, so
and also, Alan, remember the names of the people who are asking the question. So like maybe keep a mental note of when someone tops the next best question.
All right. I don't know if anybody can top the hair drying because when I get out of the shower, I feel like Razor Ramon. All right, so different techniques in jigging, different depths of water. You know what? I might actually have an illustration. I know I have an illustration in the book to highlight this. But basically, here's the story. If you're in shallow water, and we all define shallow water differently, but say like under 10 feet, your technique is different because your line angle in the water is different, right? And if you're in 50 feet, let's put it this way, your line angle is kind of more sharp. It's more sharp downward. So in shallow water, if I can use my finger as the rod, I'm kind of working the jig more up in this direction because there's actually more side-to-side motion. All right. So in very shallow water, you're swimming it more than you are hopping it or bouncing it, right? And the opposite is true in deeper water. And so one of the things that I talk about, and I'm not gonna find it quickly for this sake, but it's in the jigging book. There's a sweet spot, as I call it. So if you're working a drift, say in deep water, you want to size your jig head just right with your plastic, so it makes like there's just like an optimal angle. So you don't want it to drag along the bottom too much, and you don't want it to be too vertical, right? If you want to do a vertical presentation, I'd say switch to a spoon. If you want to do, but like I said, there's a perfect line in there, and you can adjust by adding a skirt. You can adjust by making a longer plastic or a bolt gear one, or adding a heavier jig head. So you want to balance basically the swim, which is the horizontal motion, and the hop, which is the vertical motion. And there's a sweet spot there that the fish really like. So good question, Mike.
So you sort of gave us a timeline of when you started kayak fishing. Can you sort of tell us how you've seen the sport of kayak fishing change since you first got into it? What is that? 65 years ago?
It wasn't that long ago.
20 years ago?
It wasn't 65 years ago, but it was some time ago. So I think social media has changed a lot of things. There's a lot that I've seen change, and I touched on it earlier. Is that we were a really tight knit community. All right, so snagline.com, great forum. I sort of grew up there, right, on the kayak fishing thing. We all knew each other, right? We all knew each other's handles. I still see these guys today. Some of them have gone off to do other stuff, which is cool. I see Langston actually. Langston, I wonder if he's listening. If he is, chime in, buddy. He went from fishing on his little yellow torque kayak, which you've never even heard of probably before, but it's probably one of the first motorized kayaks I've seen, which was cool. I mean, there was a lot of nuanced things there at the time. And then he went into doing some pilot stuff, and now he's doing barbecue. So I'm enjoying watching other guys. But he kind of formed this like tight knit community, and it's what we see, at least in some the solo skiff pages, where there's like a very communal type of approach because there's not that many of you. So everything you want to do is kind of new and innovative, and you want to help the next guy or girl. So that was cool. I mean, that was like a real hallmark of the sport. I would say that like as people have gotten better at this, and their dare I say egos have gotten in the way, you've got this like I'm better than you type thing in some extent, and a little bit of competition. And while it's still a good community, I think there's been some things that it's just like anything that people get into. It just gets a little aggressive in some corners of the internet, and that's not cool. We just didn't see that before. And then the other thing that I would say is back in the day, we made our own stuff, right? It all started with the milk crate. I mean, I still have the same milk crate that I found on the side of the road. I kid you not, it's a black milk crate I found. I took it, I put like a little crate saver over it, and it's got pockets and things. But back then you just made everything you needed because there was no commercial market. Now you've got guys like Luther out there doing some great stuff with Yak Attack and Railblazer, and you name whatever outfits out there.
You couldn't just go onto Amazon and order a black pack back then?
No. But hey, it's cool. It's cool to see all the innovation. I absolutely love it. It's just different than it used to be. It used to be this like, backyard mechanic type thing and you all knew each other and you all helped each other out. And it was just a little tighter knit. It was cool. Not that it's not cool now, but it's different, right?
A little different. Yeah. Talk about making your own stuff. I do come from a kayaking family. Maybe not. My dad wasn't a fisherman, but he worked at Georgia State University back, before the movie The Deliverance was made. And there's a whole nother story on that when him and his buddies ran into guys that were just like The Deliverance. But I grew up in Georgia where that movie was filmed. But him and his buddies went to a seminar at Georgia Tech and actually built their own fiberglass sit-in kayaks. Like that's
wow.
How uncommon the sport was then. And then they ran whitewater, but
Oh, it's awesome.
I guess that's the full picture of it all. Kyle asks, he says, when fishing a new body of water, what do you look for first? Or do you have a go-to search bait?
Oh, yeah. Hey, I love these questions. These are great questions. So new body of water, we got to put in context. It's going to depend on the time of year. All right. So let's say it's right now. It's wintertime. So I'm going to look for deep water. I'm going to look for a lot of different things, and then I'll kind of make a decision like that. If it's coming up on the spring, I'm going to look for something that has current. It could be a point, could be an obstruction that water sweeps over. I'm looking for features. Say it's in like September, October. I may be in a creek. I may be looking at the creek mouths, and maybe it's like November. I'm going to be at the river mouths. December. In the main stem, January main stem, that kind of stuff. So it really depends on the time of year, as far as what I'm looking for. But it's generally feature based. It's generally I'm following where the bait is, or where they would go, and so understanding what the bait does. In this case, it's Atlantic Menhaden. The juveniles are peanut bunker. So we're looking for a lot of that throughout the year, and where they go, the stripers will go, if the environmental conditions will allow it, right? So there's actually a lot to that conversation. We could talk probably all night about that exact question.
Sure could. Yeah, we sure could. We got some great questions coming here, guys. Really making my job a lot easier with these great questions. Colin asked, and I know you could, man, you're opening up Pandora's box with this question with Alan. What are your thoughts on kayak fishermen adding motors to their kayaks?
Do it. Absolutely do it. And so I think a lot of times when people ask that, they're asking a couple of different things. And it all comes down to your perspective. So why add a motor to a kayak? Some people say, well, I like the simplicity. Why would you change that, right? Hey, the thing costs as much as my kayak. Like, why would you do that? There's probably other reasons why people actually ask that question. My responsibility is this. The first time, it's Ryan. Ryan was the first one that I saw, Shady Fisher, as he used to go on Snagline. He was the first person I saw have a Torpedo. And I remember we were fishing the Susquehanna Flats. That son of a gun, he went to the other side and back. And that's not to say like you've got to go long distances to get there. But here's the thing, right? So you can save your energy and fish where you'd like, and use the motor for getting there. And I think that's a really good use for it. And I certainly use that a lot. I mean, there's areas you fish that are really strong current. that you just can't fight it. It's just not practical. I mean, I've seen you grant some inlet somewhere with your trolling motor, just kind of keeping you in place. I mean, I think that's the kind of situations, especially where they're really beneficial.
Something with like a spot lock on it. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. So those are good reasons. Safety is another one. I have broken propulsion, whether my fins or my paddle. I've broken both. It doesn't hurt to have something there to get you out of trouble, to get you home quickly. So honestly, if I forgot my motor at this point, I'd probably go home and get it. I wouldn't go out without it. I truly wouldn't. I can just fish a lot longer. I mean, that's really the truth of it, especially when you're trolling. I mean, my gosh, I mean, you might troll, 10, 20 miles a day. I mean, that's I know I'm in really good shape now from chasing my kids around, but it's not like it used to be. So the motor really helps out.
Man, I'll tell you, the biggest thing for me with electronic motors is positioning. If you have something that can help you with positioning, I know on your kayak you use your pedals for that, right? But
yeah,
having that spot lock, like I focus on fishing now instead of like, one cast reposition.
Yeah, and I'll follow up on that too. So if you look at my setup for my Outback, for my Hobie, I mean, I primarily use that for trolling. So that's set up differently than what I have is my for my solo skip. So my solo skip, for those that don't know, it's kind of like a kayak boat hybrid. It's got a 6 horsepower motor on it, and you can kind of zoom around on it, which is really nice. But you can still fish it like a kayak. So on the stern, I have my Torqeedo that I can steer, and that I use exclusively for. I mean, I could troll with it, but I really want it there for really positioning and maintaining position. So it depends on what your vessel is and what your setup is, and your perspective on really how you're fishing matters. I mean, if you're fishing a little pond, I don't know, maybe not the right thing for you. The complexity may not add it, but if you're fishing the bay, like a lot of us are, and going distances and fighting currents, I mean, if you can afford it and it's in your budget, I think it's a no-brainer.
Alan, when you're trolling with your Torqeedo, does the motor sound scare the fish?
Oh my gosh! So that question, I mean,
that's my question, and I already know the answer to it.
All right, so Jeff Little knows how I feel about this. So Jeff, if you don't know, works for Torqeedo, very good friend of mine. Actually, the reason probably I wrote my first book, to be honest with you, he's the guy that wrote the foreword. Does the motor scare it? I swear to you, I believe that the noise actually attracts the fish, and I've caught more and bigger fish with that thing running, and I don't have any explanation for what it is, but I'll tell you, I would troll with my pedals dead silent all day. I turn the Torqeedo on, and suddenly I get a bite, and I'm like, and it's happened more and more times, and I thought, I don't know, I don't have any evidence to back it, but I'll tell you what, most of my big fish I've caught have come with that Torqeedo humming. In fact, it's just to emphasize that their newer motor does not make that hum. I'm not using that one, so that'll tell you exactly, what I think.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into how I feel about Torqeedo. I mean, I owned one for a while and loved it, but the new one gets you like 1.5 miles faster, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Really, the hull of your kayak is the thing that is most limiting to your ability to speed, right? So your kayak can only go so fast. I don't care if you put a 50 horsepower motor on it, it's just going to plow water at some point. So you're adding a lot of power with very little speed advantage. So there is a diminishing return for your specific kayak and your hull. So Jeff has done a lot of good trials with that motor and with different kayaks. So you'll know exactly which ones work more efficiently than others. So
he certainly has. There's a ton of information. Last I checked, I think it's one of the bona fide kayaks. It's the fastest. But great question from Chris Walker. He says, when do you jig and when do you troll?
Oh, hey, Chris. Yeah, good question. So I would say that I rarely go out without a jigging rod on board, right? So if I am, man, that's a good question. It's a tough one. If I'm in the spring and I need to cover water and I'm looking for troughs and flats and plains, there's nothing there that gives away the fish. So a more finesse approach of throwing a jig, if there's not fish there, I'm probably not going to cast. If I don't see anything in side scan, if I don't see anything on the sonar, I'm probably going to keep trolling until I find them. So it's a good search tool. It's also a good big fish technique. Now, if I'm fishing a very specific structure, I will cast to it, and that could be at a jig, that could be with a jerk bait, that could be with a diving plug, or any of the above. But I think when people hear jigging, there's a couple different ways you can fish in the bay, and one of them is a finesse approach, which is basically how you fish with a kayak. You have to catch the fish where they are. You can't go and search them out, right? So Grant, you got a new boat here, and the first thing you do is zip across the bay and skip across 30 miles of water that there was probably a whole bunch of fish on. Yep. But you do that for a reason. You do that because you're looking for that one big school of fish. It's more of a power fishing approach, and you spend a lot more time moving than you do actually fishing in many cases. So
and I'll tell you what, Alan, in this first year plus of owning center console, caught significantly less fish just because of that, because I'm not used to it yet. I'm adjusting, you know?
That's right. They're very different techniques and approaches, but there's like two worlds to light tackle fishing. There's the finesse approach and there's the more power approach. But if you're out there in the main stem of the bay, in many cases, or river mouths or wherever, you can find humongous slugs of fish. And, that's, if you troll for those, God help you. That's not what you want to be doing. You want to be casting to those, catching a fish in an individual lure, because that's a lot of excitement. So those are a couple of reasons why you jig versus troll.
Question coming in from Kevin Hogan. He says, "Hey, Alan, what's up, brother? Hobies are great, but what other brands do you think have come to the market that are great out on the Chesapeake?"
Oh, another good question. So there are. First of all, I got to get with Kevin and go fossil hunting one time. He's on these things. So what other brands of kayaks? I wouldn't say that I'm up on all the latest brands of kayak, because I still have my 2011 Hobie, to be honest with you. And I've got my Solo Skiff, which is newer, but I'm kind of it isn't broke, don't fix it sort of guy. I do like a lot of the Hobies, to be honest with you. I have no relation with Hobie, but I think they have a good product. I think they've done a lot of R&D over the years and improved some of the things that they've had issues with. And I think that's something to recognize, that any of these new kayaks coming out, they're going to have their manufacturing issues and their growing pains and all that. And so it's just, I mean, I'm an engineer. We build stuff for a living. I know how these things go. But there's a couple of things out there that I really like. I like those Bonafides. I've seen a couple of guys have them. I think they're really nice. They've got a lot of great layout options. It's a paddle kayak. They're also really efficient. I like the whole shape. So I think those are pretty cool. I really enjoy my Solo Skiff. Now, I know that's kind of like a hybrid type thing, but you can fish it like a kayak, but still kind of get there like a boat. So I think that's a really, really cool option. Again, no relationship to any kayak company. I've seen, some of the Old Towns are pretty cool. I know some buddies, on those. I don't know. I'm blanking a little bit. I've always liked kind of the Wilderness Systems ones as well, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I really like. And of course, you've got Native. Native has done a really good job of putting out some quality products there too, with their pedal drive. So, I'd say support those companies. The ones that I don't like there's a lot of rip-off ones out there right now that basically just steal everyone else's designs. I would say, err away from those, because you're out there on a floating piece of Tupperware. I don't know what their quality control is. I mean, they're certainly undercutting these people. So I just don't know. I mean, it's a safety thing. So those are a couple of things that I'm thinking of. Sorry, I don't have a better answer. I'm not like quite in tune with all the latest, greatest stuff.
You gave us a lot. We went over several brands. I'm with you on the Bonafide. I think they make a great paddle kayak. And I've sort of gone full circle. Now that I do a lot of fishing from a center console, my idea of kayak fishing now is I want something that I can grab in one hand and go, and know in my head that I may only fish a couple square miles, right? But I'm going to have my trip planned really well, and look at Google Earth and pick 4 or 5 spots of structure of current, and just really make it much more of a micro trip than a macro.
Yeah, and that's a completely different other kind of kayak. I mean, I've seen that you've got one for sale now that would fit that bill really well. But yeah, I mean that's like the hallmark of snakehead fishing. I mean, that's a completely different thing. You take your kayak, you drag it down to some like little brush pile, and you're on the water, you're fishing this little patch for who knows how long because you're stuck in the weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a completely cool thing too, and you don't even realize you're in Maryland anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, you've done some snakehead fishing. And speaking of, the flow of this conversation, speaking of snakehead fishing, Cambo Trout asked, what's your favorite surprise catch while you've been targeting striper?
A bigger striper. Yeah, let me think about that. We've caught some ribbon fish, and we've caught some, things like, oh geez, those ugly, snotty looking fish. I can't think of what they are. Those aren't like,
shad?
oh, I can't think of. They're like toadfish or something.
Okay.
Ribbon fish are kind of cool. I mean, they're these really mirror-like, things. Hey, certainly sometimes you get like a big red bull or a bull red drum or something like that. I wouldn't say that there's been anything that's been like kind of crazy, but yeah, sometimes you catch things you don't recognize. But hey, when you're kind of dialed in and fishing for stripers, you're going to catch stripers.
Well, you must have been like fishing for stripers, down south of where I am, down around Solomon sometimes, and hooked into a red or something, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and a lot of times you go for those reds. I mean, you know that they're there, so you go and fish for them. But you never do know if they're in that school of stripers. But you fish amongst the school of stripers and blues, and there's a lot of times Spanish mackerel in there. Yeah. Hey, we came across actually, and I'm thinking about it. I was fishing with Brad Foxwell. He's a local guy. Actually lives right down the street from me. We went looking for stripers. Maybe we were looking for reds too. I can't remember. But we were in, around the Point Lookout area. Mm-hmm. And son of a gun, we didn't plan for it, but we came across, schools of cobia that we could sight fish to. So we completely switched our game, and that was a cool trip. We just completely turned a striper trip into a cobia trip, which was awesome. So that was
actually. I remember his boat. He's got a nice cobia tower on that thing, doesn't he?
I don't think he does now, but at the time we had like Matt Baden. He was on the roof of the T-top, right? and looking out. So he's got some good eyes. I'll tell you that. Yeah. I got these specs on. They just said, "Hey, cast that way," and that's how I did it.
You have 2 books out right now. Can you give us a brief overview of them and kind of what got you wanting to write those?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, hey, might as well show them right here. So, 2 books. In fact, these are the ones I'm going to give away to some lucky person. There's actually a lot of good questions, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do. So what got me into writing? I think it was one of these things I started to talk about when we first started, kayak fishing. There was nothing, literally nothing about how to catch striped bass on a kayak. I will say that one of my inspirations was Kayak Kevin. I watched some of his videos at some point and saw he was in breakers and he was paddling around the Chesapeake Bay. And I mean, it was like some really cool stuff. So I'd say there was a little bit of inspiration there to say that, no, you can actually do this. I didn't know what challenge it would bring. I don't know what I needed to do, but I mean, that was kind of the impetus for some of this. But little by little, I sort of started figuring this out, and met with Jeff, and he said, "Hey, can we do a little article? Maybe you want to write for Kayak? I think it was Kayak Fish or Kayak Angler. I can't remember at the time. Maybe write a little article on what you're learning." And so I did that, and I mean, I thought it was cool. It was the first magazine article I wrote, and I kind of said, I can write a lot more about this, and like I said, it just. There wasn't any information, and I thought that there's a big void. So I took it upon myself to compile all this information and talk about the techniques and the tactics and things that I learned, and were making me catch some fish, especially some really, really big fish, because big fish are different than smaller fish. And so I've kind of gone down that route a little bit. But one thing led to the next, and I wrote a book about trolling, and the whole moral of the trolling book is basically this. It's how do you take a large body of water? When you go to the bay, it's just massive amounts of water. How do you look at that and break that down
really
into manageable chunks? Into manageable chunks that you can fish reliably, find the hot spots, and then basically make that body of water your home body of water. And you'll kind of grow and learn. I mean, I grow and learn every single time I'm out there. So that's kind of how the trolling book came about. That one's been really, really popular. I think it's because, I mean, they're written in how-to style. So I think it says, hey, here's how to fish. Here's what you should go do. Here's how you should use it, and have fun. And it doesn't overcomplicate it more than that. So when you're talking light tackle, you can't talk about it without talking about, casting jigs or something like that, plugs. So the second one, which is actually a lot larger, you can see there's just a bunch of different illustrations and all kinds of stuff in there.
And to me, the second one also is more technical, although you still put plenty of stuff in there for someone who does not want to get into the technical end of fishing, but you do very much kind of serve both readers, right? There's a lot of technical stuff in there, and then there's the, what do you call it, like the dummies guide.
That is the challenge of writing these books, because you want to write it for everyone. You want it, and you want people to be able to grow with it. So you start out with something that everyone can learn, and then you kind of go into the more nuanced stuff. And I'm an engineer by background. I want to know how things work, and so I really take a deep dive into how exactly these things work and why you add a skirt, why you add a different size plastic, what the line does. And basically the tagline of the book is presentation is king, because when I come from a kayak upbringing, like I said, we are more finesse fishermen. And if you're in an open water bite, you might not have to be as perfect with your presentation as you do if you're casting to a single rip and you've got to get it to flow over that rock in the perfect direction with the perfect cadence. So I took that approach more than I took an open water approach, but it's all both in there. And so I think they complement each other, pretty well. So, yeah.
You made a statement that was kind of a teaser before, and I think it's like we're like just a little bit more than halfway in. We got a nice crowd in here, so I'm going to give everyone what they came for. You said big fish are different than small fish.
They are.
I promise you, of the 70 people that were in the room at the time, 65 of them went. Because, they've seen the covers of your books and what you post on Facebook. You seem to have a knack of catching fish that are, I'm going to be straight up. The biggest rockfish I've ever caught is, mid upper 30s, right? I haven't been able to crack that 40, 50 inch size thing. What's the difference between the small ones and the big ones, and of what you feel comfortable doing? What do you what are the secrets or the tips that you can share?
All right, so there's a few things. Yeah, good question. I saw on a message board one time that somebody said, well, the big fish and the small fish do the same thing. You kind of catch them accidentally. And I didn't even bother, because it's such a funny thing for me to hear, because you won't do it consistently. I mean, certainly you can catch one in there, but they do very different things, and they have different motivations, especially when they come to our bay, right? So the big fish, any fish over 32 inches, that's a female. I state that as a female. They leave the bay and they join a migration. So they go up to New England. They spend their summers there off Martha's Vineyard, and then they come back in. They enter the bay probably around like December timeframe. And that's the mouth of the bay. And then by January and February, we've got some massive fish up here throughout the whole bay. And I don't think a lot of people recognize that, but they're here
right now.
Right now. I mean, the other night I caught a fish that was 48 inches. All right. So it was in the middle of the night, right? So this is why you do these things. Now, it's a lot of work and effort to get there, because, I mean, you see a picture on Facebook and you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But you don't see the hours in the snow and the ice and unsuccessfully looking at things, because there's not a lot of them, and it's just how it is. You're looking for them at specific things. So think of it this way. What are their motivations for coming into the bay? They're here to spawn. And Maryland DNR has done a nice job of showing you where those spawning sites are, because they close those areas in like March timeframe, right? So think of it this way. They're coming in the mouth of the bay. Some of them come through the C&D canal, but the majority of them come through the mouth of the bay. So if you're in a kayak, you cannot fish the main stem. I mean, not effectively. I mean, you can. I mean, you can launch a sandy point, fish like the main stem that way at the bridge. But like for all intents and purposes, you're not going out there. If you were in a boat, those guys, they troll the channel edges with like 24 rods. You've got 2 rods at best. Some guys talk about, trolling more rods than that, but I'll tell you what, if you catch a big fish and you have more than 2 rods, you're in trouble. First of all, you're going to get tangled. Second of all, it's going to be dangerous getting wrapped in braid line. So I would warn against that. But so take a look at this way. Look at the main stem of the bay and then draw lines to each of the spawning rivers that they're going. They are going to go around a corner somewhere. And if you're in a kayak, that corner, that point is going to draw some current. Fish there, knowing that they're going to be there. You're not going to see them on your fish finder. You're going to look for like 1 or 2 fish. And so that's a good tactic in like March. I mean, all these points coming up the main stem of the bay, every one of them, a big striper is going to pass by. Now, a lot of them are going to be in the main stem along the channel edges, but on those warm days, and keep a lookout for water temperature. If it's above 40 degrees, I like a minimum of 42, 43, you've got a shot. And you can fish those days. If it's lower than 40 degrees, forget the shallows, you're not going to catch them. I mean, maybe you can. In my experience, I have never done it. I was out there 6 hours the other day, and it was like 40. I was like, well, I'm here. I might as well fish. I spent 6 hours with nothing to show for it. I knew that was going to be the situation, but I was there, and I enjoyed the day nonetheless. So,
Alan Battista gets skunked?
Yo, it's winter fishing, and that is what it is about. You've spent a lot of hours for.
I talk about that a lot with guys that are YouTubers or authors or whatever, and like all people see is footage of people catching fish or book covers of this. You don't realize that you get skunked too. I'll add one thing to what you said, and this is probably why my personal best is 36 inches. Is that if you look at a lot of these pictures with Alan and these fish, he's not in a t-shirt and a baseball cap.
No,
it's the most comfortable conditions when these fish are likely to be, where you can catch them. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, now's my prime time. I'm fishing January, February, March, and unfortunately April they've closed. But those, I mean, I would fish those 4 months and not fish any other month of the year. I mean, let's be real though. I mean, the fall is really awesome too. But it's more of a numbers game than a size game. I mean, yeah. You'll catch some 30-inch fish here and there, but I'm looking for upper 40s, and I'll fish all day for one of those. I'd rather catch one 45-inch fish than 120-inch fish.
Yeah, and that's a tough pill for me to swallow because I'm a Georgia boy at heart, and like fishing when it's 35 degrees and the water's 41 degrees is just like, that idea just is not comfortable for me. But that's why I'm, my personal best is where it is. And I think you painted that perfectly, right? Like a lot of the pictures where you're catching these big fish, you've got, a heavy winter hat on. It's foggy. It looks rainy. It's in January, February. And I think the tip you gave in terms of, where DNR closes off, during the spawning months is a big one. What's up?
I'm wearing that suit right back there. You can see the dry suit hanging up. Yeah, it's sitting there drying. That's exactly why it's hanging up. So.
I think this is a great question from our buddy Lloyd. We all love Lloyd.
Oh, Lloyd.
It kind of switches gears a little bit. And it's how do you prioritize or decide wanting to fish alone versus taking the kids with you? You and I both have daughters, and I think we do a really good job of getting them involved in fishing and the outdoors.
So that's another really good question, and also goes along with the previous one. So here's the thing. I am not taking my daughter out in the kayak in the times where I'm fishing for big fish. That's all alone time. There's just no two ways about it. If you checked out my fishing page here the other day, you probably saw my daughter with me, and we were trout fishing. And so that was cold. There was snow on the ground, and she stuck it out. I mean, that was awesome. She was a trooper. So she still actually wants to fish in the and she's 5 for those that don't know. She's a 5-year-old. And then I have a 2-year-old. She enjoys playing with my fishing lures as well, but she has not gone out yet. But yeah, my daughter, I mean, fishing is just kind of a thing in our household, and so they've been exposed to it, and they enjoy it. In the summer months, I will prioritize taking my daughter out any day over any fish I'm going to catch in the summertime. So I'll tell you what, watching my daughter at 3 years old jig up her first perch all by herself on a spoon, that was better than any fish I've ever caught in my life. So
Pretty awesome.
So that's why I prioritize. Thanks, Lloyd.
It's a great question. Rick Semin, I'm going to hope his name is pronounced, is what? Sorry, I know, Rick, you probably heard that your whole life. So what knot do you tie for a 1 ounce jig head?
I tie a Palomar knot, and I'll comment on this. That's actually a sort of a nuanced question. I've seen a lot of guys tie loop knots on their jig heads. Well, first of all, okay, so people do that because they think their jig is going to get more action, and that may be the case. I always tie one of those speed clips on, those tactical angler speed clips, because I like switching out baits, really quickly, because I'm, as I alluded to, I'm all about the presentation, and I will switch a jig head or a plastic in a second. Where I've seen guys just like retie and like I've caught 3 fish by the time they're still retying. So that tactical angler's clip already has like a loop knot in it. But the reason is, so if you tie a loop knot, as you're jigging, you're sort of snapping that loop against the eye of the jig head over and over and over and over and over again, and it's sort of like a cracking the whip type thing. And where a Palomar is gripped onto that eyelet really tightly. So I have seen a lot of loop knots break because of the abrasion and the percussion that it sees, through a day of jigging. So I just don't tie loop knots. I mean, I know there's a lot of guys that do, but I've seen too many fail, and I never really know the condition of it. So that's why I just tie a Palomar. I tie Palomar for almost everything. It's quick, it's easy, and it's really strong knot.
You converted me to the quick clips, but like I've got these big ogre hands, and honestly, it took me. Some days I could just get them on and off, and other days it felt like the quick clip was more difficult than tying a new knot. So I still use them here and there, but like literally, if you ever shook my hand, Alan, I've got like bear mitts for hands. This is a question coming from Brosky Outdoors, and it gets into sort of one of the questions that you and I were going to discuss, Alan, about mortality. But I like it better coming from a viewer. Brosky Outdoors asks, when harvesting a striper, what would you say is the max size of it to keep? Thinking about conservation of bigger breeders. Great question, buddy.
Yeah. Hey, so good seeing you here, Broski. I'll give him a little shout out. I think you guys should check out his channel. He just put up a video the other day. He was back. He's been MIA for a little while, and he used some excuse about like it's been cold or something like that. Meanwhile, I'm out there catching fish and crap. But anyway, hey, good to see you back, buddy. So what size is the max size? So let me set something straight here. We talk a lot about the breeders, and with good reason. I mean, we focus on those and we want to release those. In my opinion, there's no reason to ever keep a fish over 32 inches. Those fish are all breeders, and the bigger that fish, the more eggs it's going to lay. So a 32-inch fish may lay like, I don't know, 500,000 eggs, and more like a 50-inch fish may lay like 3 million or something like that. So the bigger the fish, the more eggs they lay, and the fattier those eggs are, and the more likely they are to be successful during the spawn. So the biggest fish are the most important. All right. So that said, Maryland's Chesapeake's biggest sin is not killing the breeders, because we have a very short trophy season. So they kill something like, I don't know, there's like 30,000 fish or something. That's a huge number, but it's nothing compared to the 500,000. I'm getting these numbers wrong, but they're kind of like ballpark that they harvest of other fish. So that's why they got to reduce the numbers to just one fish per person. We've got something like 200,000 licensed anglers on the bay. So if everybody's keeping fish, that's a lot of fish to be killed. So what I'd say is there's a lot of safe catch and release methods that you can use, especially for certain times of year, and with methods, like if you're bait fishing in summer, that's probably not real good for the fish. If you want to do that, I would say that's a harvesting technique. I'd keep whatever your first fish is, because you might have gut hooked it, and with 80-degree water, it might die anyway. So I don't know that there's an exact right size, but there's a discussion to be had with which year classes are strong that particular year. If you're going to harvest a fish, just do it responsibly. Keep the smaller ones and kind of keep the number you keep to a limit, because it's really the quantities that are being removed from the bay that keep them from getting to be big. And that's our biggest sin here in the bay.
Darwin asked a question that we sort of touched on a little bit, but maybe I think he wants a little bit more specifics here. But he asked, what are your ideal springtime conditions? CFS, weather, etc.
All right, my ideal conditions are as follows. I want a calm day, so no wind. I want the strongest tidal flows, and so that could be, water releases. That could be, rips that are created on the surface. That could be discharges. I want the strongest flow, because those flows, in my opinion, are what are drawing the stripers to their spawning grounds. So they're going to follow those up, and you want to look for those. So calm days, strong flows. What else?
And if I can interrupt you, if you're not comfortable, or if you don't know where to find like how fast the current's going to be moving, do you have a way of finding that? Do you have an app that you use?
How fast the current's going to be flowing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any particular app there, but if you're looking for, for example, like dam releases, there's online sites for that. You can check that out. If you're looking for, the strongest flows, you can check a tidal chart. You can look where the really high tides are, where the really low tides are. I would say that I'm not very tide specific, more that it's moving. Now there are caveats. I've caught fish in very slow conditions where it's been slack. In fact, I remember a very specific situation. I was on the Susquehanna Flats, and I was trolling around, and the guy said, "Well, we're just going to take a break," and I was like, "No, we might as well keep moving." And son of a gun, we're just catching like a couple 40-inch fish right in a row, and so that told me that there are exceptions, but so fish when you can, but really if you can, strongest tidal flows, overcast days, in fact rain. And low fishing pressure is another big one. So if there are boats around, you're not going to catch any fish. I mean, you're not going to catch really big fish, and I've learned that year over year over year. So go there in situations where people aren't around. And that could be raining, that could be at night, that could be when it's really really cold. But avoid all other anglers, and that is probably the number one method to success. Don't fish near anybody.
Don't fish near what?
Anybody.
Yeah. Wes asked, and guys, keep the questions coming. This is great. Hi, Alan. When is topwater sluggo type fishing productive in the Chesapeake? I live in Northeast and fish the waters of off Massachusetts from June through October using sluggo type baits a great deal of the time.
Hey, Wes, how you doing? So I actually met Wes was messaging me this morning. So we had a good little conversation. I think he's going to be moving to the area, so we'll hopefully give him some good tips here. So when you say sluggo type, I mean I'm taking that to mean like a weightless plastic or something like that. I'll include basically any type of topwater for that matter. So April is really the time when you start doing that. You can go out in the flats. Now they've closed April, unfortunately. But you can go out in the flats and start catching some great topwater stripers around April. It gets better in May. June is really good, and then so as July kind of hits, it wanes because of environmental conditions. But late August it picks back up. September is really really good. But when you're talking those sluggo type baits and you're living in Massachusetts, you're talking big fish, and April would be the time of year to do that if we were allowed to do that. You can still do it in May, but those big migratory fish are basically leaving the bay at that point. Thanks, Wes.
These people are asking. I'm telling you, Alan, they're asking all my questions for me. Like this is what I ask for everyone, because I was this guy at one point. When I had caught one striped bass, I was that guy that was new to the sport. Mark Nicholas Jr. asked, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone beginning to learn how to troll for stripers from a kayak?
One piece of advice. The thing I would warn them is the first fish is the hardest fish to catch. And man, I can't tell you how many times guys have written me and say, I got my first striper, and who knows? It doesn't even matter how big it was. It could be 10 inches. And that person is just out of the world excited because it was the first sign of success. I mean, because you spend a lot of time out there, you're moving around, you have no idea if anything you're doing is going to work. So stick with it. I was going to say like read my books but I don't want to be like a promotional kind of thing. I'm just saying like I've written it all there, and I try to make it as easy as possible.
It's right in the book. Just read it.
Just read it, Mark. You got it. But no, I mean, just stick with it and don't go overboard. Keep it really simple. Do it in a time of year that makes sense, that is easiest. And I'm going to say like, May, June is a great time for kayakers that don't have dry suits. When the water's getting warmer, it's getting nicer, and those fish are still in the rivers. You can troll around with just some simple X-Wraps and plugs, stick to depths at like, 8 to 12, 8 to 15 feet, and just enjoy the day, checking the shorelines and that kind of stuff. Stick with it because that first fish is the hardest, but you need something to build off of, and you will.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a lot that fishing is one of those few things that failure teaches you nothing. If you don't catch anything, if you have nothing to establish a pattern on, it's really hard to learn. Now, if you've already caught some and you fail, you can learn from that. But failure in the beginning is really tough, and it's hard to learn something from that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If someone's new fails, it's different than if you go out and you're trying a pattern and you're exploring, and you fail, because then you prove that pattern is not in play, and you should try something different.
But if you just
I've learned a lot by failing. Let me tell you that one. And that's actually the real reason why I got into these big fish. That first year I came down here and was fishing the Susquehanna Flats, and man, I heard about all these big fish are being caught. Like, man, I went out there. I spent so many hours. I caught this many fish my first time out there fishing. I mean, the first season out there fishing. I didn't know squat. I mean, I was using lures that weren't going to catch anything. I was in areas that weren't productive. But man, it was a humbling experience, and I think that just left a sour taste in my mouth, and I never looked back. But and that's why I've tried to share these things so nobody else has to. They can stand on my shoulders a little bit and help see. Help cut out maybe that first really unsuccessful, painful season.
Yeah. This next question comes from Fisherama, and I think you and I both have very strong feelings in terms of conservation. But whether you're someone who harvests or you're a catch and release guy, I think we all want this resource to be around for years to come. This question comes from Fisherama, and he says, you've been posting about rockfish population conservation. What are the ways that people can get involved to help manage that? You guys are not helping me with the grammar here. Managing the fishery other than following regulations, catch and release, and donating to organizations.
Yeah, hey, that's a really good question, and a lot of things that people ask. One of the first things that we have to do is to change the opinions of the populace, basically. And so we're coming out of it like a historic fishery where it's a saltwater fish and people want to harvest them, and it's hard to change that mindset. I mean, largemouth bass are the same way. I mean, it's hard to think now, but back when your grandfather was fishing, they kept every one of those largemouth that they caught, and now it's kind of taboo. We are shifting that direction. I don't know that we'll ever shift that direction, but we're seeing the first thing is to have the conversation. And I'm going to guarantee that if you talk to somebody that isn't part of the fishery, that just is a casual person, they don't recognize that striped bass are in trouble the way they are. So trying to help, change the tide of that is big. And I think those conversations are a thing that we can all do. Another big thing that we can do are go to those meetings, go to the meetings in Annapolis, where they ask for your comments, and you can give your feedback. Comment on the public comment periods when DNR sends those out for regulations, because I'll tell you what's going on right now is that our commissioner in the Atlantic States Marine Fishery Commission, he's basically sold out to basically special interest, and he's telling everybody that we need to kill fish. I mean, Marylanders don't want to go out and just fish for fish. They need to kill them. Is basically the message. And Maryland's a bad player in conservation. New Jersey's another one, and there's a couple others, but those are probably the worst offenders. So showing the world, showing the other commissioners through public comment and through online support and following some of these organizations. I recommend checking out American Saltwater Guide Association. They do a lot of blog posts. They're on Facebook, but they keep you aware and they tell you what the actions they need. A lot of public comments are needed right now. And so I would say check them out and follow their blogs because they do a really nice job. So yeah, all those things I think are things you can do. Go to the meetings, comment, and educate others, and and kind of be a good example is the best way to do it. And that's how you sort of change mindsets.
Yeah. My opinion of this has evolved over the years, and I think where I've landed is that people have the right to harvest, and they should. It's a great way to feed your family, but I think where I've landed is save the big ones. Let a 20-inch rockfish can really feed. A couple 20-inch two 20-inch rockfish can feed you and your wife and a couple of kids. I know I've said that before, and they're like, "Man, you haven't seen my kid eat." Yeah.
But bear in mind, like I said, I mean, Maryland's biggest sin is killing the small fish. They harvest too many. I mean, we Baltimore, Annapolis, DC. I mean, it's hugely populous areas where a lot of people fish, and so it's really hard. It's really hard for all those people to take fish in a sustainable way, and allow those fish to grow big and actually spawn. So that's worth recognizing. I haven't kept a fish in many years, and I'm not saying that you should do that. It's hard for me to do it now, just sort of knowing what I do, knowing what I know. So you got to make your own choice. If you're only going out, one day a year, take that fish. But if you're going out like once a week or a couple times a week, you might not want to load up the freezer.
Yeah. Question coming in from Mike Shelley. And guys, if you're waiting for the prize, we're probably going to go a few minutes extra. There's still, well over 60 people. Well, there's 60 people in the room now. So we'll probably go another 4 or 5 minutes, answer 3 or 4 more questions, and then we'll do the prize drawing. Mike Shelley asked, what are the rod actions that you use for each application?
All right. So for each application, and for those that don't know, I'll explain rod action really quickly. It's basically where the rod bends. All right. So if you're talking a very fast action, extra fast action rod, basically just the tip bends. I mean, the whole thing will eventually bend. I'm trying to get my finger on the screen, but basically the tip is more sensitive, and then
the tip is always...
Easy there, Grant. Easy there.
I'm talking about fishing rods, dude.
I was still talking about fishing too. This has gotten weird, but hey, I actually have a rod here, so let me talk about it. Maybe it's going to be hard to see. This is actually a custom-made rod. This is the Buoy 21 rod. So for those that followed, you know what this is all about. Buoy 21 rod. This is a custom rod that I developed with Steve Fogel, and so I did this specifically for kayak anglers. But this is an extra fast tip, and so if I bend this, and this is not going to get in the screen really well, it's not going to work. But basically, it bends a lot more at the tip than at the rest of it. So you do that because you want to sense your jig. I mean, the tip is basically like a little spring, and it's a feeler, like an antenna, right? So you're sensing your jig hitting whatever surface it is. It could be a fish's mouth, right? You don't want to miss that one. Could be a rock, could be a mud bottom, but that's where your real sensitivity comes in. So you want it extra fast. Sitting up over there in the ceiling, I've got a Parabolic Action Rod, which is not for stripers, but that's for steelhead. And the reason you do that, the Parabolic rod is one that bends like the whole thing. It's not very sensitive at all, but the thing bends like a rainbow. And that's for steelhead fishing because you're using like 6-pound test on 30-inch fish or better. And you need the rod to take the shock of the fish. And you can't upsize your line because, as I find out, they're very line weary. So you use really light line, and you use a really Parabolic Action Rod. So for stripers, there's everywhere in between. If you're really looking for something casting, you may not want that extra fast tip. You may want it to bend and get a little more whip further down the rod. So those are different considerations, but certainly for anything jigging, use extra fast. For trolling, I'll use a range. I might use, fast, medium. It just depends on what my setup is and I don't necessarily want to rip the lure from the fish's mouth.
Right.
So if I'm trolling with mono or something like that, you can get away with a stiffer rod. But if you're trolling with braid, you might want something a little bit softer, because if you have braid, which doesn't stretch, and then you have a rod that doesn't give, you might rip a bigger hole in that fish's mouth than you want and lose it. So those are the considerations, and for whatever situation you're in, that'll probably set you up.
Yeah, and I know I tend to fish a little bit farther south than you guys, but if there's speckled trout mixed in, they've got a lot softer mouths than a lot of the other fish in the bay,
Right.
and you're very likely to rip a hook right out of a fish's mouth. We're going to do 2 more questions. One from John: do you tag fish all year?
So tagging fish. So I started tagging some fish here recently, which has been kind of cool. I caught a really large fish last spring, and it was actually the first recapture that I had. I think it was like a 47-incher or something like that. I was curious where it went, so I tagged it. It was caught. Unfortunately, it was harvested, and so that was a little sad. But I learned where it ended up, and it ended up in Bristol, Rhode Island. So here in the bay, all the way up, several hundreds of miles away. And actually, through the magic of social media, I found out who that person was, and we had a little discussion, which was cool, and I found out a little bit more about it. So I've been doing it because I'm curious where these fish go. I don't necessarily tag fish all year long. I think I'm just more interested in tagging the spring run fish and see where they end up. I think I know where the fish, if I catch a 20-inch fish in summer, I'm pretty sure I know where it's going to go. So I'm not too interested in that. Basically, that fish is going to live in the bay, and it's going to move north and south with the water temperatures, right? So I'm more interested in those larger ones.
And last question, I think this is a great way to end the night, guys. I'm going to put a link in the chat on how to purchase Alan's books. I guess it's probably a good idea to stick around and see if you won the books before you buy anything. But question from, I think we'll just say MIGES Fishing. I have all your current books. When's the next one coming out, and what's the subject?
All right. Well, since the question was asked, you didn't plant that one in there, did you?
Me?
I know you didn't. All right. So here's the deal.
I'm curious.
All right. So I've been keeping this under my hat for a long time. I have been working on another book, and in some cases I've teased it, and some people know what it's about. I'm going to keep the actual topic under my hat until I actually announce it, but it's going to be coming out really, really soon, like any time now. I've been working on the next one, and I'll tell you, it's not about snakeheads. I know there were some guesses about that. I'm not qualified to write a book about snakeheads for sure. Joe Bruce has written some good ones there. I highly recommend those if you want snakeheads. But this one's about stripers, and it's going to complement the other ones very well. It's going to create a Chesapeake trilogy, if you will. So the writing is pretty much all done. I'm doing the cover artwork now, which is a lot of fun. I'm doing the final pictures, throwing them in there. So I've been working on this one probably 7-8 years, and it's a big book. I mean, it's about 450 pages right now, and you're going to reference it all the time. I guarantee it. So as you go through some of this stuff and you write these books and you talk to all these people, I mean, we've got some great questions here. I get these questions on a daily basis, which is wonderful. I love meeting people and talking to people, but you kind of find out where their misunderstandings are and where the mistakes are, and what people really need to know and what they don't know. So this third book is going to complement the other two, and I think if you can't catch fish at that point, I can't help you, because it will all be laid out there. And as with the other ones, I've a lot of illustrations, maps, detailed descriptions about exactly what to do. So I'm looking forward to announcing that one. That was a good question. Put me on the spot, but hey, I figured I'll talk about it now. Yes.
Alan, I saw there was 2 or 3 similar questions that rolled in, and I was like, it's on my mind. I mean, I knew it was gonna heat you up in the boots a little bit, but I was like, why not? Just throw it out there.
I'll tell you, it's kind of bittersweet thing. So when you release a book, I just give you a little look behind the scenes here. You're kind of nervous because you spend a lot of time putting yourself out there, right? It's what you think. It's how you think things work, and
sure,
you just hope things have been well received. And unfortunately, those have been. So I guess you get more books, But it's kind of like a friend. So instead of dorking around the internet at night, I'm writing. So I've been writing most nights for the better part of a decade, and that's a lot. It's a lot of work, and especially with kids, it's made it a lot harder. So it's a little bittersweet. So you're excited to finish this project and get it out to everybody, but you're also like, oh man, I mean, there goes my little baby that I've been working on for all this time, and now what? So yeah, there's mixed emotions, but there's a lot of excitement trying to get it out to you guys, and I'm curious what you think. So so that's actually a really good one to end on.
Well, speaking of excitement, do we need a drum roll?
Drum roll
For the question of the night, who our winner is?
Who's gonna get this? We've got some really good questions. Mike Schulte asked a couple of really good ones that stuck in my mind. So I don't know if he has the books. Maybe he can comment in if he does or not, or if he wants them. I don't know. I hate to give somebody that has them already.
That's a good point, Mike. Are you still here? And if you are, do you have the books already? How about we do this? Mike is our first place winner. We'll reach out to him. Did you remember a second?
Oh man, I don't have the questions in front of me. They were all so good.
Okay, so we have all of the questions recorded in the chat bot. Oh, hang on. Mike does not have the books.
Oh, all right. He's the winner.
Boom.
Thanks for the questions. I had fun. That was good. I didn't expect so many questions, to be honest with you. So
yeah.
I mean,
well, I did. I did. Once I saw the number of people that were coming, I did. Guys, if you don't own the books, don't hesitate. Go do it now. I mean, he explains it on a technical level, on a very simple level. I mean, a lot of it, even in the first book, even though the Susquehanna Flats are a little bit more difficult to fish now than they used to be, there's a lot of information really on spots, which are golden. But, you got to be one of the hardest working guys I know, because you got a full-time job, 2 kids, and now you're working on a 3rd book. So, man, you really put in the work. You deserve all the accolades. Thanks so much for coming out, man.
Thanks, Grant. I appreciate the chance to do this, and I appreciate all the questions here. And hey, if you don't buy the books, I don't care. Come see me on the fishing page, and we'll talk fishing. That's most of the fun anyway. So I hope to see you guys some more. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And I can't promise that he gives you the same information that he gave me, but he's a teacher past the books. I think Facebook said at one point that he responds to 99% of his messages within a day. So I don't know if that's still the case, but I know he is very, very giving with the information, as long as you're not asking where his honey hole is. But thanks so much, Alan, and we'll catch everybody next week, same time. Take care.
See ya.
Just like